Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. Hi there, welcome back to part 2 of the series on communications. And before we dive into today's episode, a couple of reminders. Applications are open for the new members or for new members for the Facebook discussion group for estranged parents and estranged adult children from different families. If you're interested in that, please email the estrangedheart@gmail.com. And if you have questions you'd like to have answered on the podcast by myself and or AC, please drop us an email as well. Or if you have topics you'd like us to cover that perhaps we've not already covered, there, as a reminder, we're on episode 99. And so there are lots of other episodes if you want to scroll back through previous ones to see if the answers you're seeking are there. But if not, feel free to email us, theestrangedheart@gmail.com. And before we get into the quotes, I just want to give this reminder to folks. Today's episode is on the power of words. And words have the power to heal or harm. They have the power to demonstrate or destroy love. The words that you speak have power. That old saying of sticks and stones, but words will never hurt me, that's not true. And I think that all of us know that deep inside. So listen to today's episode. I'm hoping that you'll get lots of good nuggets to chew on and think about, maybe give you a different perspective. Today's quotes, I actually just have one quote today. Language is our most important portal to new choices and second chances. And that is by Brene Brown. On to today's episode. So we're back with the second episode of our communication series. And today I wanted to talk about, something that has come about in all estrangement circles that I am a part of, to include my support groups, other support groups, clients, etc. And I wanted us to ease into this conversation about words and language used and labels to describe our estranged loved one. I think both of us are aware that there are many estranged adult children who refer to their parents as toxic or narcissist. And I think that parents, I'm seeing an uptick in some of that same language being used now about adult children. But I think with parents, there's always been well, she was always a difficult child, or she was always just overly sensitive, and labeling the kids that way. And one of the questions I always ask the moms that I work with is, how can they look at their adult children as anything different than what they have labeled them as? And generally I'm met with a blank stare. And to me, that stare indicates they've given no thought to that. And my take on this is I think it's really difficult to think of someone in a different light than the light of the label we've put on someone. And I mean, that goes to anybody, but especially our estranged loved one. And so I'd like to bring that to the table for conversation today when it comes to communication. What are we communicating to ourselves about the estrangement experience? What are we communicating to ourselves about our estranged loved one?
This is actually something I've put a lot of thought into over the years. I mean, obviously, I'm looking at it from a slightly different perspective than maybe you have in the estrangement circle.
Mhm.
But I mean, even if we want to move a little bit outside of relationships, just to broaden the scope of this whole thing about how labels affect the way we see the world around us,
Mhm.
labels absolutely are going to affect our focus, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's human nature, part of our evolved need to understand and categorize things, dangers, benefits, people, environmental factors, all these things. Like, things need labels. Every word that I'm speaking in this sentence in a way is a label, right?
Mhm.
They're essential to the way we interact verbally. The problem is, yeah, very much like what you're saying, if these labels are, I hate to say the word negative, but
Right.
I think in this context, yeah, these labels, they are negative. If I'm going to look at my mom and say, well, she's a narcissist, she's
Mhm.
toxic, she's this, she's that. I mean, I'm not serving the situation for sure. I would argue that I'm not serving myself as an individual very well either, or her, because I mean, if we're going to consider her reputation.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I'm not sure how to, and this is where my thought process has always taken me over the years. I'm not sure how to stop this seemingly hardwired need to assign labels. So what
Mm.
I have tried to do, I can't say I'm super good at it, but what I've tried to do is to get away from using nouns as labels and shift instead into using verbs.
Mm.
Like in the context of my mother, instead of saying my mother is toxic, I could say my mother is trying.
Right.
Instead of saying she is pig-headed, I could say she is challenged, she's limited, by her experiences, these kinds of things.
Right.
I don't know if this is landing or if this is helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I don't think I know because I've employed similar things. So one of the things that I try to do is to say, instead of using the noun, she's a narcissist, is to say sometimes she expresses narcissistic behaviors, right? So that we're not labeling her as an individual. And I think that that is where a lot of the parents get, I mean, obviously they're hurt. No one wants to carry the label of being a narcissist. But I think even beyond that, it's the reputation. It's the I am this according to my kid. And if we apply that label, is there room for anything else? Can mom be anything else? So if we're using a verb as opposed to a noun, I think that that does leave room for other things. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, we're both sort of approaching things in similar ways. We're trying to soften up the language to
Right.
avoid typecasting the person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know about you. I personally hate being typecast. I hate being labeled,
Right.
because while you may be accurately labeling me in this moment, in the next moment, that label doesn't fit anymore.
Correct.
It's just like
Correct.
there's some the example I like to use for people who just don't seem to get that. So, well, no, we're the same people in every situation. Sure, there is a degree of truth to that, but we're also different people in every situation. Just like a
Hmm.
die has six sides,
Hmm.
we have multiple sides too. And depending on how we're rolled, which side you're looking at us from, you're going to see different things. But ultimately, the die is always going to be that same cube with the same six sides. I'm still going to be the same me with the same sides to my personality. You're going to be the same you.
Hmm.
Mom's going to be the same mom. The kids are going to be the same kids. Let's not focus in on this one thing that we can't stand and let it take up the entire horizon of our view of them. Let's
Right.
instead take things in context. Like parents of young children tend to get this pretty well. Let's
Hmm.
focus on the behavior, not on the child.
Hmm.
I'm going to speak to the action, not to the person.
Correct.
Why then, when we're dealing with the adult kids or when the adult kids are dealing with the parents, do we just lose sight of this really, really obvious thing, which is the need to separate the individual from the behavior?
Right. Well, that is so you've kind of blown me out of the water there because I have a 2.5-year old granddaughter, and that is exactly what her mother does, right? Her mother and father is they separate out her behaviors. She's she is not bad. She is not rude. It is this behavior that is. It is whatever is happening in that specific moment. I think it's interesting, and I would love I really and truly would love to hear the feedback from the adult children on this entire topic today, because that is the place that I tend to hear the most negative things. Um, However, I'm starting to see an uptick in that happening with the parents as well. And I don't know if that's just a self-defense mechanism that's kicking in. Well, I'm going to fight fire with fire kind of thing. And if that's what you're doing, I'm just going to stand here and say, if you fight fire with fire, you're going to burn the whole damn thing down. I mean, it can't help but happen. Um, so that's a side note. I'm seeing an uptick in the parents labeling kids as cruel and all of these things. And then the next breath, they're describing, they used to be so loving and kind.
Hmm.
And I'm like, but that part of them is still there.
Yeah.
They're hurt, and perhaps their behaviors are a result of that hurt, but they themselves are not cruel. You are feeling like this behavior is something that is cruel. But are they really a cruel human being? And if we flip that coin for the adult kids, every adult child I've ever talked to has said at some point in time, and again, I've not talked to, this is not for the cases of extreme abuse and things like that. I'm talking your average Joe estrangement situation. The kids that I've talked to have all said, yes, there were times when my parents were amazing and gave me what I needed in the moment, kind of thing, right? They provided for me. I had a roof over my head. I went to excellent schools, etc. So if your parent, there have been times that your parent has been this way. Are they now 100% totally this narcissist? And if so, where did that come from? Like same thing with the cruelty. Like, when did this come about? Did it come about when you were hurt by their behaviors or lack thereof? In the case of kids who weren't tended to emotionally. And then if we walk around in our worlds talking about our toxic mothers, our narcissistic mothers, or our cruel kids, we begin to believe that about them. And I think that that is where the danger comes in, because then we are labeling them as this person 100% of the time. And that's what I try to get parents away from, is this, can your kid have done something that left you feeling like what they did was very cruel, and can they be a really great kid?
I think we're more likely to communicate with each other when we consider that the other person is coming from somewhere, that they are motivated by things, that they have stories.
Right.
When I talk to estranged adult children, I mean, I just, at some point we're going to have to do an episode about this whole narcissist label, because it just pisses me right off. I'm so sick to freaking death of hearing about how everybody's a narcissist. If you're not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, you're not qualified to make that diagnosis. I don't care how well the internet tries to make it fit on mom. You're
Right.
not qualified. Just leave it alone, please. Couple of reasons there. One is you can't diagnose. The other one is that it turns into shaming somebody for a mental health condition that they didn't ask for. And I'm not about either of those things. If your feelings are hurt, sorry, not sorry. Now that I've gotten that off my chest and I feel a little bit better, one of the things I hear over and over and over again with the estranged adult children around this narcissism piece is that usually it's mom was a narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. When I call out these same adult children and say, but you are exhibiting the very narcissistic tendencies that you have a problem with mom, what's up with that? I start hearing another one of those fun terms that gets thrown around a lot, which is secondary narcissism. Well, I'm not a narcissist. I may have all the narcissistic behaviors, but it's not my fault. Narcissistic behaviors were my normal. That was the narcissistic environment I was raised with. Therefore, I'm justified. But my mother
Mm.
is still the aggressor. She's still the abuser. When I turn it around one more time and say, have you considered that mom, if following this whole secondary narcissism thing, which I don't buy, but
Mm-hmm.
following that train of thought, is it possible that she was similarly raised in an environment where these sorts of behaviors were normal, and that she might also be exhibiting what you label as toxic for that reason? She, like you, is a product of her environment. Is it fair to
Right.
blame her while excusing yourself? Maybe the person that did both of you dirty is several generations back. You're both victims of the same abusive person way back when. We don't know who that is. All we know for sure is right now, today, I behave a certain way. You behave that same certain way. We're bouncing off each other in really, really terrible ways. Our communication is affected just because, again, like this focus, it lands on the wrong spot. When I'm so busy labeling you, but I don't want to accept that same label on myself, even though it fits both of us equally well, that is not fair. And that is cancerous to
Right.
healthy communication. There's no point even using words at that point. You will not hear each other once those labels have been slapped on that aggressively.
Correct. And that's exactly what I was getting ready to say, is that I don't know about you. I am less inclined to want to talk to someone who believes that I'm a narcissist. I'm less inclined to talk to someone who believes that I'm cruel. So how is this going to help mend anything? How's this going to help us to reconcile? How's this going to help us to move into a different place of, even if reconciliation isn't on the table, just to be able to get to a place where you can have some inner peace in your life without going through the world describing your estranged loved one with this label. whatever this label is, right? That is the piece for me. I mean, I'm here. Oh my gosh. In the beginning of my estrangement, I called my kids everything under the sun. I gave them all the labels. I told, they were selfish and cruel and da 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 da. And you name it, I did it. And it did nothing to serve to bring them back to me. Nothing. And it really didn't serve me to help me want to have a relationship with them, because I was so focused on quote unquote their cruelty or their selfishness, etc., that I had no room to consider what I talk about all the time, the behaviors. Where are the behaviors coming from? Why that are showing these things? The door was shut. When you slap labels on things, the door is shut and sealed in essence. And there's no space to consider anything else. And as you said, no one, unless they've been diagnosed, and I'm here to tell you, I work with psychotherapists. Psychotherapists cannot ethically diagnose someone they have not seen and interacted with. So if your therapist is labeling your parent or your kid, diagnosing them as a narcissistic mother or a narcissistic child, and they haven't laid eyes on them and they haven't talked to them for more than a half an hour, that is unethical behavior. So take that for what it's worth. Get me on my high horse about this. When we can address the behaviors, I talk often about behaviors are communication. Just they're giving you a story. They're telling you a story. Why is this person behaving this way? If we can come at it from the curiosity, from that perspective, we tend to lessen and bring down our walls, because to have curiosity, you can't have a wall up that says this is who they are and I'm not going to believe anything else. If that's where you're standing, you have zero curiosity. So in order to have curiosity, the walls have got to come down a little bit. And then we can begin separating out the individual from the behaviors, just as we do with the little ones. And we can sort through, okay, these are the behaviors that my mother exhibits. These are the behaviors that my adult child exhibits. I don't like these behaviors. I don't agree with these behaviors. I don't want to be interacting with someone with these behaviors. And that is totally legit. Mm-hmm. That's totally okay to say that. When you throw the label on them and you throw the wall up, because with the labels comes the wall, there is zero curiosity and you're unable to separate out the person from their behaviors. And then we have broken communication that is really hard to reestablish in a healthy way.
No, and I think I know you mentioned the curiosity component over and over again, but it applies everywhere. So I'm glad you did. I mean, people, including us, we need to chew on this, right?
Right.
I think another thing that we've mentioned again that definitely ties into this whole thing, if we want to think about why are we slapping these negatives on these people that we love? Why are we doing this? The outcome is not productive if the goal is to get along. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we slap these negative labels on because if we demonize the other person, we're more likely to get a bunch of people blindly supporting us.
Yes. Yes.
Which is, isn't that an enjoyable high?
Right.
It's not good for us in the long run. At some point, we need a support system that's going to hold us accountable. That support system is more likely to hold us accountable if we are communicating honestly about each other. I think another reason that we slap labels on is simply because we know that that shift of focus to the ugly things makes it really, really easy to be angry with the other person.
Right.
And some people listening might be thinking, well, why would I want to feel angry towards the other person? And this is like that thing that keeps getting mentioned over and over again, that capital letters, quote unquote, the work that we
Yeah.
all have to do.
Right.
When you start doing the work, you quickly realize a lot of things. One of them being that being angry is a lot more manageable than being hurt and
Yes.
helpless and ignored and weak and frustrated and confused and needing closure and all these other things. If you can
Hmm.
get a real good anger burning,
Right.
if you can fan the flames of that, man, you are powerful.
Hmm.
You know, instead of sitting there feeling sad, well, my kids don't talk to me. You know what? I don't want those little bastards in my life, anyways. They treat
Right.
me like crap. I did everything for them, and this is the thanks I get. Screw them.
Hmm.
Do the work. Figure out these labels, just like the behaviors. They're coming from somewhere. Figure out what that somewhere is.
Yeah.
Work on it, please.
Right. You're absolutely correct. It is way easier. Most people are more comfortable with getting pissed off and being mad and angry than they are with actually feeling the feelings of hurt and pain. Nobody wants to step into that, and it's much easier to do exactly what you just said. Screw them. I'm done with them. If they want to be like this, then fine. I'm going to go on with my life without them, kind of thing. And you have every right. You have a choice to do that. By all means, you have a choice to do that. However, I have not met a person who comes at life from that perspective that has a peaceful heart.
Hmm.
Never, because it's filled with anger, and anger and peace cannot coexist like that. It's just not possible. So, if your goal is to walk around, and I'm saying this because I did this for decades of my life. If your goal is to walk around and be pissed off with the world, be pissed off with your parent, your kid, what have you, have at it. But you're not going to have peace. You're not going to feel that things have been resolved. There will always be this some little piece of something that is unresolved floating around in your system. When you can do the work and you can get in touch with that hurt and that pain and work through it, all of the anger, the desire to slap labels on people tends to just dissipate when you deal with the hurt and the pain, right? And the place to do that is not online. It's not it's not to do it in a forum or a group that, as you said, is going to get everybody on your bandwagon to, agree with you, 4,000 people that agree with you that your kid's just a rotten piece of crap, right? That's not helpful. The place to vent and do the processing of your feelings regarding your estranged loved one is in a therapy room or a coaching space.
Right.
It is not out in public for everybody else to be a part of. One of the things that my group, my support group online struggles with from time to time is our rule number two. Rule number two is we must post things from a place of curiosity versus judgment. And we cannot use labels and name calling to talk about other people, to include our kids, This is a group for estranged mothers, so we don't do that about our kids, their partners, and other people. And they get in the group. Typically, it's our newer members will come into our group and just go down, throw out this litany of things that they can't stand about their kid and how their kid has harmed them and hurt them, et cetera, et cetera. They get the post is removed, then they get mad and talk about how bad admin is, and they won't, it's censorship, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, it's not censorship. I'm asking you to reconsider, how else can I word this in a way that can take the focus off of the anger and put it into a space of unlearning, learning, growing, and healing. And you cannot do that when you're walking around calling people names and slapping labels on them. You just can't, it can't be done. And when you don't have that sense of peace, and then depression sets in, and then it's just this whole crescendo that happens at that point, and it's hard to come back from. It's really a challenge to come back from. So I encourage people to begin asking those questions. We don't ask enough questions, in my opinion, especially when it comes to communication. We're all about telling someone else what to do, giving instructions, judging, making statements, etc. Very rarely, I mean, in my world, I certainly didn't hear it until I got myself into therapy. Do we hear, I wonder why they talk to me that way? I wonder why they behave in this way when they're around this person. I wonder why, I don't hear questions. I hear statements, which are judgments, and these they should be doing this, that, and the other thing. The best thing I ever did as far as communication goes was to learn how to get curious and learn how to ask questions. And it changed my world to include how I thought about other people. And again, as we talk about often, this all has ripple out effects. It's not just about our children. You could use this same topic and apply it to your spouse, to your parents, to your neighbor, to your colleagues, to anyone, right? So
I think the effects ripple inward too, which is helpful, because if I start getting curious about the people I'm relating to, well, why did you do that? Why do you feel that way? Why do you use those types of words? I can't help it. I'm going to get in the same habit of asking these same questions to myself instead of making statements. Well, I did this because case of why did I honestly do this? I become more about the curious exploration than in these bold statements of what might or might not be fact.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful. Yes. So to circle back around, when we can come from a place of curiosity and asking questions that can lead us to self-reflection, as you just said, right? And it can lead us to a place of exploring and coming up with potentially different answers than what we've ever encountered before, because we've not been asking questions. We've been making statements and passing judgments. So we can do that for ourselves, and we can do that for our estranged loved one or anyone else for that matter. So how helpful could that be when we turn from labeling our parent? And again, labeling our parent or our child. I want to interject here and just say, I understand when we are hurt and in pain, it is natural to want to lash out. Absolutely. I just said that's okay. It is absolutely okay to do in the space of a therapy room, right? Or with a coach, or someone that can hold that space, and you're not putting it out there into the universe, and you're not walking out through the world believing and processing this label, my mother is this and my child is this. There's a space and time for that, and we all need that. No one that I know of can go from being hurt and in deep pain to, oh, I'm super curious and now I want to ask all these questions, without going through the anger piece. I mean, I think that's all a part of the grieving process that we all have to go through when we are estranged. So that piece is important. I don't want anybody to think that I think that they should just miraculously get to the other side. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's a time and a place for that. And helping ourselves and others to become curious will help to lower the walls, keeping boundaries in place, but also opening ourselves up to, could there be something else? Could this person be something besides this label that I've assigned to them? Is there a possibility? When we live in the world of possibilities, all sorts of doors open.
I think that's where I think everybody just needs to camp out there on that world of possibility. Every major advance that our species has made has been because of that curiosity to be, what else is there? What else can be known? How much understanding can we gain? The mathematician, the philosopher, the explorer, they're all driven by that same thing. And I think as family members, as friends, as just people who bump up against other people, we need to be driven by that same thing, because nothing at all is possible. It's not just, well, you're going to live in a world of possibilities with that curiosity. There are no possibilities without the curiosity, as far as I see it.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I think that that's a good place to kind of leave it today. Yeah, I want to encourage everyone to consider what that might look like in your world. If you were to move from the world of labels to the world of possibilities, what could happen in that space?
Okay. And if you are curious about Kreed and this project, you can learn more at theestrangedheart.com. And if you would like to explore the possibility of supporting this project, you will find links available on that website as well.
Perfect. Thanks, AC.
Thank you, Kreed.
This brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent, and that you are able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you've received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing this podcast with others, leaving a positive review, perhaps entertaining becoming a guest on our show, or following us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. As a reminder, there is an online support group on Facebook. If you are a estranged mom who identifies as being spiritual and approaches estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and desire to do inner self-work and reflection, please seek us out. We can be found at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out to me via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com.